The soft rustle of Paul's worn military jacket whispered stories of bravery and sacrifice, each frayed thread a testament to years gone by. His hands, calloused yet gentle, trembled slightly as he adjusted his cap, eyes scanning the sea of flags fluttering in the gentle breeze. Every year, this day felt heavier on his heart, a weight that seemed to grow with the years, intertwining with the memories of comrades lost. Paul was no stranger to sorrow. It had been his constant companion since the day he first donned the uniform, a badge of honor that had both uplifted him and shackled him to the past. As he stood among the crowd, a mix of young and old, he couldn't help but feel a bittersweet pride swell within him. The energy of the gathering thrummed in the air, a collective heartbeat of reverence and remembrance. His mind drifted back to the laughter of his friends, the ones who had shared rations and dreams, the ones whose faces were etched in his memory, forever young and forever missed. Today was not just a day of mourning. It was a celebration of their lives, a promise that their sacrifices would not fade into obscurity. With each moment, the crowd around him pulsated with life, families clasping hands, children swinging flags, and the elderly sharing gentle smiles. Paul had always found solace in the camaraderie of such gatherings, a shared understanding that transcended words. Yet he often felt like a relic, an old soldier navigating a world that had moved on without him, where the battles fought were now echoes in the wind. He inhaled deeply, the scent of blooming roses mingling with the crispness of the morning air, a reminder that life continued to bloom even amid the ashes of loss. A sharp pang of nostalgia swept through him as he recalled the vibrant faces of his fellow soldiers, their laughter ringing like music against the backdrop of their shared struggles. He wished they could see this moment, this gathering of people whose lives had been touched by their sacrifice. Suddenly, the bugle's mournful notes pierced the air, calling everyone to attention. The sound resonated deep within him, awakening a mixture of pride and pain. Paul straightened, his heart pounding in rhythm with the haunting melody. As the national anthem began to play, he placed a hand over his heart, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him like a heavy cloak. He could feel the warmth of the sun on his face, but it did little to chase away the chill that crept into his bones. The ceremony unfolded around him, a symphony of emotions swirling in the air. He watched the faces of those nearby, their expressions a mirror of his own, reflecting respect, love, and an unspoken bond forged through shared history. Yet, as the final notes of the anthem faded, a wave of dizziness washed over him, blurring the edges of reality. He shook his head, trying to clear the fog clouding his vision, but it was as if the ground beneath him had suddenly become a tempest. Before he could brace himself, the world tilted, and he felt himself slipping away, the murmurs of the crowd becoming distant echoes. As he fell to the ground, the initial shock of cold earth against his skin jolted him back to the present. But it was fleeting. Darkness enveloped him, a familiar embrace, and he surrendered to it, his thoughts drifting like leaves caught in a gentle stream. However, unbeknownst to him, a ripple of concern surged through the crowd like a current. Faces turned, voices rose, and the atmosphere shifted from one of solemn remembrance to urgent action. Strangers rushed to his side, their hearts beating as one, woven together by an instinctual drive to protect and honor. Beneath the chaos, a profound stillness settled over the group. They were united by a singular purpose, a shared appreciation for the sacrifices made by men like Paul. As the first person reached his side, a young woman knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she checked for signs of life. Her eyes darted around, seeking help, but in that moment, there was no time to waste. She squeezed his hand gently, willing him to awaken, to feel the warmth of human connection. Others began to gather, forming a protective circle around him, their faces etched with concern, but also with respect. They understood that this man, this veteran, was not just a stranger. He was a symbol of resilience, a living narrative of courage and sacrifice. Without a word, the group began to hold hands, a silent pact forged in the face of uncertainty. Each person felt the weight of the moment, the gravity of Paul's sacrifices resonating in their hearts. They didn't know his story, yet they felt compelled to honor it, to stand together in solidarity as a living tribute to the values he had fought to protect. The seconds ticked by, each moment stretching into an eternity as the world outside faded into a blur. In their quiet vigil, the gathering became a tapestry of humanity, woven together by threads of compassion and empathy. The young woman spoke softly to him, her voice a gentle balm against the chaos, reassuring him that he was not alone. Around them, others began to share their own stories, their own experiences with loss and love, each word a thread connecting them to Paul and to one another. As the sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer, the line of strangers remained steadfast, their resolve unyielding. They felt an unspoken bond forming, a connection that transcended age, background, and circumstance. In that moment, they were not just individuals. They were a collective force, a manifestation of humanity at its best, standing together in the face of adversity. Paul's awareness flickered like a candle in the wind, struggling to find its footing in the tempest of sounds and sensations. He could hear voices, distant yet close, the rhythm of life pulsing all around him. Slowly, consciousness began to seep back in, an awakening from a long slumber. And as he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a line of faces, each one filled with concern, compassion, and something deeper, something that transcended mere empathy. In that moment, the veil of darkness lifted, and Paul found himself not only surrounded by strangers, but embraced by a community that had formed in his moment of need. The sight brought tears to his eyes, a rush of emotion flooding through him like a tidal wave. The essence of what it meant to be human, to be connected, washed over him, and he felt a warmth that had long been absent from his heart. It was a powerful reminder that even in moments of despair, kindness could flourish, and the spirit of unity could rise from the ashes of fear and uncertainty. The faces before him were not just strangers. They were the embodiment of his belief in the goodness of people, a testament that the sacrifices of veterans like him would never be forgotten, but rather celebrated in the hearts of those who came together to honor them. As the paramedics arrived, the line of strangers held firm, a continuous thread of support that would remain with Paul long after the day faded into memory. This moment, captured forever in their hearts, would echo through time, a reminder that humanity thrived in connection, a beautiful tapestry woven from the threads of kindness, compassion, and resilience. The sirens wailing gradually faded as the paramedics pushed through the gathered crowd, their professionalism a stark contrast to the emotional whirlwind surrounding Paul. Yet, even as they worked to assess his condition, the strangers remained steadfast, their hands still interlinked like a chain of hope. Each face reflected a myriad of emotions: concern, compassion, and an unwavering respect for the man who had given so much of himself in service to their country. Paul's eyes fluttered open, and he blinked against the blinding sunlight that filtered through the trees overhead. The faces before him came into focus, blending into a mosaic of kindness and solidarity. Each individual seemed to embody a fragment of the many lives he had touched, recalling the camaraderie he had experienced during his service. The realization that he was not alone flooded his heart with warmth, banishing the chill of despair that had gripped him moments before. "Hey there!" A voice broke through the fog of his consciousness, soothing yet firm. It was the young woman who had knelt beside him, her face radiant with relief. "You're okay. Help is here." Her voice wrapped around him like a comforting blanket, and he felt the tension in his body begin to ease. The paramedics worked efficiently, assessing his vital signs and checking for any injuries. Paul felt the gentle pressure of their hands as they took his pulse, but he was more aware of the circle of strangers surrounding him. They had transformed a moment of vulnerability into one of profound connection. The sight of them, united in their shared purpose, ignited a flicker of hope within him. As the emergency responders prepared to lift him onto a stretcher, Paul mustered the strength to speak. Thank you, all of you, he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt inadequate, but they were all he could muster in that moment. He wanted to convey that they had done more than just offer their physical presence. They had given him a renewed sense of belonging, a reminder that his sacrifices had not gone unnoticed. The young woman smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. No need to thank us. We're just doing what anyone would do. You mean so much to all of us. Her words resonated deeply within Paul, striking a chord he hadn't realized was still alive. As the paramedics gently lifted him onto the stretcher, he caught glimpses of the faces in the crowd. Some were young, perhaps experiencing their first Memorial Day, while others were older, their eyes reflecting a lifetime of stories. He could see the tears glistening in some of their eyes, yet there was an unmistakable air of strength and unity that enveloped them all. Once they secured him on the stretcher, they began to wheel him away. But before Paul could be taken from the gathering, he felt a surge of determination. "Wait," he called out, his voice stronger now, fueled by the energy of the moment. "I want to say something." The paramedics paused, and the crowd fell silent, their collective breath held in anticipation. Paul took a moment to gather his thoughts, his heart racing as he looked at the sea of faces that had become, in an instant, his family. "Thank you for being here," he began, his voice steadying with each word. "Thank you for reminding me that I'm not just a name on a wall or a memory fading away. You've shown me that my sacrifices were not in vain." The crowd erupted into applause, a spontaneous outpouring of appreciation echoing through the park. Paul felt a warmth spread through him, a recognition that transcended the barriers of age and background. In that moment, he was not just a veteran. He was a link to their shared history, a reminder of the enduring spirit of humanity. As they wheeled him toward the ambulance, Paul's gaze lingered on the group of strangers, their faces illuminated with compassion. He could see them sharing stories amongst themselves, united by the experience they had just shared. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the unexpected connection that had blossomed in the midst of his vulnerability. The ambulance doors swung shut, but the bond he felt with the crowd remained, a thread woven into the fabric of his being. Inside the vehicle, the paramedics continued their work, but Paul's mind drifted back to the faces he had seen just moments before. He could hardly comprehend how a single moment could shift his perception of the world so profoundly. The cityscape rushed by outside the window, but he was no longer just an observer. He was an active participant in a narrative that was larger than himself. The memory of the faces in the crowd would follow him, a reminder that there was still good in the world, still kindness and compassion waiting to be found. As the paramedics checked his blood pressure and heart rate, Paul felt a sense of calm wash over him. He realized that he had been holding on to his grief for far too long, allowing it to define him. The gathering had reminded him of the beauty in connection, the joy in shared stories, and the power of collective resilience. After a few minutes, they arrived at the hospital, and the paramedics expertly maneuvered the stretcher out of the ambulance. Paul was wheeled through the sterile hallways, the antiseptic smell a stark contrast to the warmth he had just experienced in the park. Yet, even in this clinical environment, he held onto the memory of the gathering. The doctors and nurses began their assessments, but all he could think about was the group of strangers who had formed a line of solidarity. He wondered if they were still there, if they had shared their own stories of loss and love, if they too had felt the profound impact of that moment. As they prepped him for further tests, Paul's heart swelled with gratitude. He had entered that day carrying the weight of his memories, but now he felt lighter, buoyed by the realization that he was part of a larger narrative, one where every sacrifice mattered, where every story was woven into the collective memory of those who had come together to honor their fallen. In the days that followed, as Paul recovered, he found himself reflecting more on the encounter. News of what had happened at the Memorial Day service began to spread, and with it came stories of the strangers who had come to his aid. Each of them had their own reasons for being there, their own connections to the past, yet they had united in a moment of compassion that transcended their individual experiences. Social media exploded with posts and pictures, capturing the essence of that day. Hashtags like hashtag honor the fallen and hashtag unity and compassion began to trend, and Paul's story became a beacon of hope for many who had felt isolated in their grief. People began to share their own stories of loss, their connections to veterans, and their own moments of kindness. Paul watched as the world reacted to the footage of the strangers holding hands, forming a protective circle around him. The images struck a chord, igniting conversations about empathy, the importance of community, and the need to remember those who had sacrificed for their freedoms. It became a reminder that, even in a world that often felt divided, there were still moments that brought people together. As he sat in the hospital, surrounded by cards and well wishes from strangers and friends alike, Paul felt a sense of purpose rekindle within him. He resolved to continue sharing his story, not just for himself, but for all the veterans who had come before him and for those who would follow. He wanted to honor the memories of his fallen comrades, to ensure their sacrifices would never fade into obscurity. Through his journey, he discovered that connection was a powerful antidote to loneliness. He began to reach out to local veteran organizations, sharing his experience at the Memorial Day service and encouraging others to come together in support of one another. He understood that healing came not just from remembering the past, but from building bridges and creating new narratives filled with hope and unity. As he prepared to leave the hospital, Paul felt a renewed sense of purpose. He walked out into the world with the knowledge that he was not alone, that countless others were standing with him, ready to share their stories and support one another. The gathering at the memorial had transformed him, and he was determined to pay forward the kindness he had received, to continue the ripple of compassion that had begun that fateful day. The sun shone brightly as he stepped outside, the air fresh with promise. Paul took a deep breath, letting the warmth fill his lungs, and he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one of connection, resilience, and a commitment to honor those who had sacrificed so much. It was a journey he would embrace, hand in hand with a community that had reminded him of the power of unity in the face of adversity. The warmth of the sun washed over Paul as he stepped outside the hospital, invigorating him with a renewed sense of purpose. Each breath he took was filled with the scent of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the sterile environment he had just left behind. The vibrant colors of spring seemed to mirror the newfound hope blossoming in his heart. He glanced around, taking in the world that had continued to spin even as he had momentarily lost himself in despair. As he made his way down the street, Paul couldn't shake the memory of that day at the memorial. The faces of strangers who had become so much more than that in a matter of moments. Each smile, each tear shared in silence, had etched itself into his memory. He was no longer just a veteran burdened by the weight of loss. He was surrounded by a community that had chosen to stand with him, to honor the sacrifices of those who had come before him. With every step, he felt the urge to connect with others, to share his story and listen to theirs. The journey ahead was not just about him. It was about the collective experiences that shaped their world, a tapestry woven from threads of sacrifice, love, and resilience. He envisioned starting a local support group for veterans and their families, a safe space where stories could be shared without judgment, where the memories of fallen comrades could be honored together. His mind raced with ideas as he walked, imagining gatherings filled with laughter, tears, and the healing power of camaraderie. It was time to bridge the gap between generations, to share the wisdom of the past with the hope of the future. He envisioned a place where younger individuals could learn the importance of remembrance, the value of service, and where older veterans could find solace in knowing that their sacrifices were not forgotten. As he approached a nearby park, the lively sounds of children playing and families enjoying picnics filled the air. Paul paused for a moment, taking in the scene. The park became a symbol of life continuing, a poignant reminder that while some battles were fought in silence, others were celebrated with laughter and joy. He could see families gathering around picnic tables, their conversations punctuated by the occasional burst of laughter. It was a beautiful sight, one that reminded him of the normalcy he had fought to protect. Feeling inspired, Paul settled onto a bench, allowing himself to reflect on the journey that had led him to this moment. He thought about the friends he had lost in combat, their faces flashing through his mind like a slideshow of memories. Each one had their own dreams, their own families, and the realization that their lives had been cut short weighed heavily on his heart. But today, he felt a shift, a sense of responsibility to carry their stories forward, to ensure that their sacrifices continued to resonate. With his resolve strengthening, he pulled out his phone and began to type. He crafted a message to a local veterans organization he had previously connected with, proposing his idea for a support group. He wanted it to be a place of healing, a sanctuary where veterans could come together to share their experiences and forge new connections. He envisioned inviting families as well, encouraging them to share their stories of love and loss, creating a comprehensive understanding of the sacrifices made by service members. As he hit send, a wave of excitement coursed through him. Maybe this was what he had been searching for, a way to give back, to foster the connections that had so profound. LY impacted him at the memorial. He knew there would be challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Paul's vision began to take shape. The local veterans organization was enthusiastic about his idea, offering to help him set up meetings and reach out to others in the community. Word began to spread, and soon, veterans from all walks of life were expressing interest in joining the group. As the first meeting approached, Paul felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. He prepared himself for the possibility that some may not feel comfortable sharing their stories, that others might be hesitant to open up about their experiences. But he also held on to the belief that connection could heal wounds that had long been buried. On the day of the inaugural meeting, Paul arrived early, setting up chairs in a circle to foster a sense of community. He decorated the space with photographs of veterans, images of soldiers in action, and snapshots of families who had supported them during their service. Each picture told a story, a reminder of the sacrifices made and the lives touched by their courage. As people began to filter in, Paul greeted each member with a warm smile. There were veterans of all ages, some fresh from active duty, others who had served decades ago. Each person brought their own unique story, their own struggles and triumphs. Paul felt a sense of camaraderie begin to blossom, a recognition that they were all united by a shared bond, a tapestry of experiences woven together by time and sacrifice. The meeting began with introductions, and Paul encouraged everyone to share their name, branch of service, and a brief story about their time in the military. As the circle opened up, he listened intently, his heart swelling with pride for each story shared. There were tales of bravery, of friendships forged in the heat of battle, and of the quiet moments that often went unseen but held immense significance. One veteran shared a story about the day he received his deployment orders, the mix of fear and excitement that washed over him. Another recounted a moment of levity during a particularly difficult mission, how laughter had served as a balm for the soul. Each story resonated, creating a palpable energy in the room, a sense of understanding and empathy that wrapped around them like a warm embrace. As the meeting progressed, Paul felt compelled to share his own experience. The moment at the Memorial Day service when a group of strangers had formed a line of solidarity around him. He spoke about the warmth of their presence and how it had reminded him that he was not alone, that there were people who cared deeply about the sacrifices made by veterans. The room fell silent as he recounted the moment, and he could see the tears glistening in the eyes of others, a reflection of their own battles and struggles. It was a powerful moment, one that ignited a spark of connection among them. The room buzzed with energy as stories began to flow freely, laughter mingling with tears as they shared their triumphs and losses. In that space, they found solace in one another, a community of understanding that breathed life into their shared experiences. As the meeting drew to a close, Paul felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. He had envisioned a gathering of veterans, but what had emerged was so much more. They were not merely a group. They were a family, bound together by the stories of their past and a mutual commitment to support one another. With each meeting that followed, the group grew stronger. They shared resources, organized outings, and even began to plan community events to honor veterans in the area. Paul felt invigorated by the progress they were making, the connections being formed, and the sense of purpose that permeated the air. As the group's influence expanded, Paul began to receive messages from individuals outside of their circle. Families of veterans, active duty service members, and even civilians who wanted to learn more about the sacrifices made by those in uniform. It was a beautiful reminder that their stories transcended boundaries, reaching hearts eager to understand the weight of service and the importance of remembrance. One evening, as Paul sat down to write his thoughts, he realized that he had not only found a way to honor his fallen comrades, but had also rediscovered his own voice. The echoes of the past had transformed into a melody of hope, a symphony of stories that celebrated resilience and unity. The impact of their gatherings rippled through the community, inspiring others to engage in conversations about service and sacrifice. Local schools began to invite veterans to speak, eager to educate the younger generation on the importance of honoring those who had fought for their freedoms. Paul knew the journey was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and stories of loss intertwined with tales of triumph. But he also understood that these experiences were essential threads in the fabric of their collective narrative, one that would be passed down through generations, reminding them all of the power of connection and the importance of honoring those who had come before. As he reflected on the journey that had unfolded since that fateful day at the memorial, Paul couldn't help but smile. He had transformed a moment of vulnerability into a movement of compassion, a reminder that even in the darkest times, kindness could illuminate the path forward. In the heart of the community, Paul had found not only healing, but a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer just a veteran carrying the weight of his past. He was a beacon of hope, a storyteller, and a bridge between generations. And as he continued to forge connections, he knew that together, they would honor the legacy of those who had sacrificed so much, ensuring that their stories would never be forgotten. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over the park as Paul sat on a bench, watching families and friends gather for the evening. The laughter of children echoed around him, a symphony of joy that filled the air, contrasting sharply with the solemnity of the memorial service just weeks prior. Those days had been heavy with grief, yet now, they seemed to spark a flame of renewal within him. The warmth of connection and community was palpable, and he felt more alive than he had in years. As he sat there, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come since that fateful day. His heart swelled with pride as he thought about the support group he had started. What began as a small gathering of veterans seeking solace had evolved into a thriving community, rich with stories of bravery, loss, and healing. It was no longer just about sharing their experiences. It was about building a legacy, a promise that their sacrifices would resonate through time. Paul pulled out his phone and opened the group chat he had created for the support group. Messages flowed in from members sharing their week, seeking advice, or simply expressing gratitude for the camaraderie they had developed. Each notification felt like a heartbeat, a reminder that they were all connected, united by a shared purpose. He smiled as he read a message from Mark, a younger veteran who had recently joined, expressing his excitement about the upcoming community event they had planned to honor local veterans. "Can't wait for Saturday. I've been talking to my friends about this event, and I think we're going to have a great turnout." Mark's enthusiasm was infectious. Paul could picture him, a wiry young man with a quick smile and an eagerness to learn. He had opened up about his struggles transitioning to civilian life, and Paul knew that the support of the group had provided the foundation he needed to start finding his way again. Paul's thoughts drifted back to the first meeting, the nervous energy that had coursed through the room as stories were shared. Each member had come with their own burdens, but together, they had forged a bond that transcended their individual experiences. The laughter they shared, the tears they shed, and the quiet moments of understanding had created a sanctuary where they could all feel safe. "Hey, Paul, mind if I join you?" A familiar voice interrupted his reverie. It was Sarah, a fellow veteran who had become a close friend since joining the group. She waved as she approached, her hair pulled back in a neat bun and a bright smile on her face. "I brought some iced tea. Thought we could sit and chat about the event. Of course. I'd love that, Paul replied, motioning for her to take a seat beside him. As she settled in, he could see the sparkle in her eyes, a testament to her resilience and determination. Have you thought more about the speeches we need to prepare? She asked, her tone casual yet earnest. I know you mentioned wanting to share something about your experience at the memorial. Paul nodded, recalling the profound impact that moment had on him. I think it's important to convey how much that day meant to me, not just for myself, but for all of us. We need to highlight the collective experience of being a veteran, the importance of community support, and how vital it is to honor those we've lost. I agree, Sarah said, her expression turning serious. It's easy to feel alone in this world, especially when you're battling your own demons. But those moments of connection remind us that we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're part of something larger. Paul felt a surge of gratitude for her insight. Sarah had a way of articulating the unspoken struggles that many veterans faced, and her passion for helping others shone through in everything she did. Exactly, he replied. We need to remind everyone that we're in this together, that every sacrifice matters. It's not just about the past. It's about paving a way for the future. They spent the next hour brainstorming ideas for the event, sharing stories and laughter that echoed through the park. Sarah spoke about her own struggles with PTSD, how she had felt lost and isolated for years until she found the group. I was amazed at how many of us were experiencing similar feelings. Yet we all thought we were alone, she said, her voice tinged with emotion. It's such a relief to know that there are others who understand what we've been through. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Paul felt a renewed sense of determination. Their conversations had sparked something deep within him, a reminder that their mission was more important than ever. They were not just sharing their stories. They were creating a movement of compassion that echoed far beyond their circle. Let's finalize our speeches this week, Paul suggested, his voice resolute. We'll make this event something truly special, a celebration of our shared experiences and the strength we find in one another. Absolutely, Sarah replied, her enthusiasm infectious. And I'll make sure to reach out to some local media. We want to get the word out and invite as many people as possible. This is a chance to really showcase the importance of community support for veterans. As they wrapped up their planning, Paul felt a sense of purpose wash over him. He was no longer just honoring the fallen. He was actively working to create a legacy of kindness and connection that would ripple through their community. He could envision the faces of those they would reach, the families, the children, and even the veterans still struggling to find their place after service. As they parted ways, Paul made his way back home, his heart lighter than it had been in years. He knew that the journey ahead would not be without its challenges, but he felt ready to face them head-on. With each passing day, he was reminded that he was part of a tapestry woven from threads of sacrifice, resilience, and love. And as long as he had his community by his side, he knew he could face anything that came his way. The week flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. The support group met several times, each gathering filled with laughter, stories, and a shared commitment to making the upcoming event a success. Paul felt a sense of camaraderie that he had longed for since his service, a feeling that filled him with warmth and hope. On the day of the event, the park was alive with activity. Banners hung proudly, adorned with images of veterans and messages of gratitude. Tables were set up with information about local veteran organizations, resources for mental health support, and ways for civilians to get involved. The scent of barbecue wafted through the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and music. Paul stood at the entrance, greeting guests as they arrived. Families poured in, many with children in tow, eager to participate in the festivities. The atmosphere was electric, a palpable sense of excitement hanging in the air. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everyone who had come to honor the sacrifices of veterans, to celebrate life and community. As the event kicked off, Paul took a moment to survey the crowd. He spotted familiar faces from the support group mingling with newcomers, sharing stories and laughter. It filled him with joy to see how the bond they had created was expanding, reaching out to others who were eager to connect. When it was time for the speeches, Paul felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He walked to the front of the crowd, a microphone in hand. As he looked out over the sea of faces, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. This was more than just a gathering. It was a testament to the power of connection, the beauty of shared stories, and the resilience of the human spirit. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, his voice steady. "Today is not just about remembering our fallen comrades. It's about celebrating the community we've built and the connections we've forged. Each one of you is a vital part of this tapestry, woven together by our shared experiences and our commitment to honor those who have served." As he spoke, he could see the audience leaning in, captivated by his words. He shared his own story, the moment of vulnerability at the memorial, and how the kindness of strangers had turned into a movement of compassion. It's easy to feel alone in this world, but today reminds us that we're not just individuals. We're part of something greater. Together, we can break the barriers of isolation and create a culture of understanding and support. The crowd erupted in applause, a collective acknowledgement of the importance of their gathering. Paul felt a surge of energy, a reminder that their mission was resonating. It was a powerful moment, one that would echo in his heart long after the day had ended. As the event continued, Paul listened to other speakers share their stories. Veterans discussing their experiences, families expressing their gratitude, and community members highlighting the importance of honoring those who had sacrificed. Each story was a thread woven into the fabric of their collective memory, a reminder that they were not alone. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Paul felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. They had created something beautiful, a space where stories could be shared, where connections could be forged, and where the legacy of veterans would be honored for generations to come. In the months that followed, the support group continued to thrive. The event had sparked a movement, inspiring others to engage in conversations about service and sacrifice. Local schools began to invite veterans to speak, eager to educate the younger generation on the importance of honoring those who had fought for their freedoms. Paul found himself busier than ever, but the work felt meaningful. One evening, as he sat down to write a message to the group, he thought about how far they had come since that day at the memorial. The connections they had forged had blossomed into a network of support that spanned far beyond their initial meetings. Paul could hardly believe the transformation that had occurred, not only within the group, but also in the wider community. The stories of courage and resilience had become intertwined with the fabric of everyday life, reminding everyone of the sacrifices made by veterans and the importance of honoring their legacy. As he reflected, a notification pinged on his phone, interrupting his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah, filled with excitement. "Hey, Paul, you won't believe this. The local news wants to do a segment on our group and the upcoming event we're organizing. They're interested in sharing our story and spreading the word about the importance of supporting veterans." A thrill of anticipation coursed through Paul as he read her message. This was a significant opportunity to shine a light on their mission and the community's efforts to honor veterans. He quickly typed back, "That's incredible news. Let's make sure we showcase everything we've accomplished together. It's time to let our voices be heard." Over the next few days, they worked tirelessly, preparing for the interview and ensuring that every aspect of their journey was highlighted. They wanted to convey not just the struggles they faced, but also the triumphs, the healing, and the connections that had formed through their shared experiences. Paul felt a renewed sense of purpose as he engaged with members of the group, encouraging them to share their stories and the impact the support group had on their lives. The day of the interview arrived, and the atmosphere was electric with energy. Paul stood in front of the camera, flanked by fellow veterans who had become like family. As they spoke, he felt a sense of pride swell within him. Each person shared their journey, their battles with PTSD, and the camaraderie they found within the support group. The stories flowed, punctuated by laughter and tears, and Paul knew they were creating something special. When the segment aired, the response was overwhelming. The community rallied around their message, expressing gratitude for the service of veterans and the importance of supporting one another. Social media buzzed with shares and comments, with people expressing their own experiences and connections to veterans. It was a beautiful reminder that the ripple effect of kindness and compassion was reaching far and wide. In the weeks that followed, Paul noticed a significant increase in attendance at their meetings. New faces filled the room, eager to share their stories and connect with others who understood their struggles. The energy was palpable as they welcomed veterans of all ages, each one bringing their unique experiences to the table. Paul felt a sense of fulfillment as he watched the group grow, the bonds forming like threads in a tapestry of resilience. One evening, as they gathered for their regular meeting, Paul decided to introduce a new initiative. "I think it's time we expand our outreach to include more community involvement," he announced, his voice steady. "We've shared our stories, and now it's time to show others how they can support veterans. I propose we organize a community service day where we can all come together to give back." Excited murmurs filled the room as the veterans discussed potential projects, cleaning up local parks, visiting nursing homes, or even hosting a fundraiser for veteran support organizations. The enthusiasm was contagious, and Paul felt a wave of inspiration wash over him. This was not just about their healing. It was about creating a culture of service and connection that extended beyond their group. As they began to plan the community service day, Paul felt a sense of purpose solidifying within him. He realized that the impact of their gathering was not limited to their own healing journey. It was about fostering a spirit of compassion throughout the community. They were becoming ambassadors of kindness, reminding everyone that service was a two-way street, where giving and receiving went hand in hand. On the day of the community service event, the park was alive with activity. Families gathered, laughter echoed, and the warmth of connection filled the air. Paul watched as veterans and civilians worked side by side, digging in the earth, planting flowers, and painting fences. It was a beautiful sight, one that spoke volumes about the power of unity. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the park, Paul gathered everyone together for a brief, closing ceremony. He stood before the group, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you all for being here today, for embracing the spirit of service and connection," he began, his voice steady and clear. "Today, we've not only beautified this space, but also strengthened the bonds that unite us as a community. Let's carry this spirit forward, ensuring that the sacrifices of veterans are always honored and that no one feels alone in their journey." The crowd erupted into applause, a collective acknowledgement of the importance of their gathering. In that moment, Paul felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. They had created something beautiful together, a legacy of kindness that would echo through the community for years to come. As the group dispersed, Paul felt a renewed sense of purpose settle within him. They were no longer just a support group. They were a movement, a living testament to the power of connection and compassion. He knew that their journey was far from over. There would always be stories to share, battles to fight, and lives to touch. As he walked home that evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. Paul felt a sense of peace wash over him, a reminder that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had forged a path not just for himself, but for all veterans, and together they would continue to honor their fallen comrades, ensuring that their stories would never fade into obscurity. He smiled, knowing that the tapestry of their experiences would only grow richer with time. And as long as they stood together, hand in hand, there would always be light to guide them forward, a beacon of hope that would illuminate the path for generations to come.